Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am back with some more ADHD tips. One of you called them cheat codes, and I love that. So yeah, I'm gonna give you my ADHD cheat codes. I kind of just have had a lot of ideas of just like practical life things that I have previously struggled with, slash still do, that I have some advice and some tips on. So I'm just going to start making videos talking about those things. And again, like I said in my last video, please leave comments down below if you have questions or if there's something that you're like, oh, this is so hard for me. Do you have any ideas? Because maybe I do, or maybe others of you do. I literally just forgot what I was going to talk about today. Right, okay. So today I want to talk about decluttering, cleaning, stuff management, kind of that physical and visual element of your living environment, your working environment, maybe your education environment. Because I know that for a lot of us with ADHD, probably not all of us, depending on our life experience, but a lot of us can become really overwhelmed by clutter, whether visual or physical or both. Just the clutter existing can be overwhelming. And then also the thought of trying to do something about it to fix it or make it better can also be very overwhelming. And especially if it's your living environment, imagining just carrying that weight with you at all times throughout your day because you're waking up in that environment, you're walking around in your home, doing your everyday tasks in that environment, you're trying to fall asleep peacefully in that environment. It's very difficult. It's very stressful, even kind of on a subconscious level, if that environment is cluttered. One reason that I think exists for the fact that people with ADHD can become overwhelmed by clutter is because people with ADHD have a hard time sometimes. Okay, this is very general, right? Not everyone with ADHD experiences the same symptoms or the same things. So when I generalize about ADHD, I'm just talking about some things that are likely relatable for a lot of you, but maybe not for all of you. So with that said, a lot of people with ADHD can have a hard time with the mental prioritizing of things. I think I said this in my last video in a different context too, but if you are, for example, at the store and you're there trying to buy, like, let's just say a sunscreen, and there's 30 different types of sunscreen on the shelf. I'm imagining this wall of sunscreen that they have at Target in the summertime, and I remember one time walking up to it and just being like, okay, no. It was just too overwhelming. Or even for me, for example, if I go to a restaurant, it doesn't matter how many times I've been there, unless I have like just one thing that's my go-to, I will sit there indefinitely staring at the menu, not knowing how to weed out the bad options and select from the good options and choose something in the end that is the thing that I want. So the way that this applies to clutter, especially in your living environment, is that when your brain is being stimulated by so many things at once, it can sometimes get overwhelmed to the point of paralysis. So if you open your eyes in the morning and you look around and there's clothes all over your floor and hanging off your bed and on the chair, and there's stacks of papers in the corner, and I'm naming things that are in my room right now, by the way. There's boxes that need to go into the attic, right? And you look around and you see all of this clutter. Not only is that visual stimulus that is going into your brain and having to be kind of prioritized in your brain, in terms of, what those things require of you and stuff like that, but those things, as you look around, each one represents a task that is outstanding. And so, for example, if I look around and my room is super cluttered and messy, and I'm like, shoot, well, I have to do XYZ things today, but I'm looking around and I'm seeing 95,000 tasks that are before me. Now my brain is suddenly having a hard time prioritizing the things that I already had to do today, plus the things that I'm looking around, ostensibly requiring something of me. And whether or not you truly have to do something about those clutter items right now in the moment is immaterial, because in the ADHD brain, like I said, oftentimes that prioritization of what's urgent, what's pressing what's time sensitive, that is a difficult thing to do, especially the longer the list of tasks becomes. So just imagine waking up optimistic about your day, thinking about the list of things, maybe 7 to 10 important things you have to get done that day, and then opening your eyes, and all of a sudden your brain is flooded with all of this essentially confusion, okay? And so that is a lot of times what can cause us to become paralyzed. And for me, if I get into that state, I just am like, I can't do anything. And that is such a frustrating place to be in. And there is some kind of proactive work to help you get out of that place. And there's also some in the moment work that you can do to help you get out of that place. So in the moment, if you're stuck in that overwhelm of thinking, okay, I have these things that I have to get done today, but then look at these 1 million other things around me that are calling my name, then the best tip that I have, I'm going to recommend lists again. Here's the thing. For me, when I have all of this kind of abstract, swirling confusion and overwhelm happening in my brain, it is so indescribably helpful to make that abstract confusion into a concrete thing that I can see the edges of, that I can manage, that I can manipulate, that I can evaluate. So this would be a really good time, and I will link my list making video down below. This would be a really good time to employ the different types of to-do lists that I've spoken about before. The first one being a brain dump. So the best thing to do in this case when you are paralyzed by confusion and overwhelm when it comes to tasks and clutter would be to write down everything in a brain dump. Just take 5 minutes, okay? And keep in mind, as I said in my other video, this brain dump is not a to-do list. Do not let this brain dump overwhelm you. All it is pulling the drain on this proverbial bathtub full of junk that you have in your brain, right? So just pull the drain, let it all fall out onto the paper so you can look at it, so you can actually do something with that information. So once you've done your brain dump, then you can take things from that are actually important and leave everything else behind. And when you take things from that brain dump that are important, you're going to make a short to-do list, right? So again, refer to that video. I go much more in detail about this process, but the brain dump is just to drain the bathtub. And then from that, you can extract what is helpful and leave everything else on the paper. And you can keep the brain dump around so that later you can reflect back on it and say, okay, I have some time now. Is there something that's not super urgent, but that I actually have time to address that I can help kind of lighten the load of that brain dump situation? Another thing that I like to do is actually not keep the brain dump, recycle it, and then next time you're feeling overwhelmed, do the brain dump again. And the reason that I do it this way is because I feel like even if I keep the brain dump paper around, I still need to do that physical act of writing it down again. So I don't always keep it around. I just kind of repeat the process as necessary. And what this does is, because the ADHD brain often has a hard time prioritizing on its own in the way that other brains might be able to do, it kind of gives you command, like conscious command of that process instead of relying upon your brain to do it on its own. So when you see things out on a piece of paper, on a list, on a brain dump, whatever it is, you can then look at it with your eyes, process it intentionally, and kind of have that space in your mind cleared for that new information or thought process, whereas before it was very cluttered and disorganized. That's the word. In terms of more longer term, kind of a more proactive approach to clutter, this is a huge part of managing your mental load, and your mental clutter burden, I guess, is managing your visual and physical clutter. So one thing that I highly encourage is to what I call get it there so you can keep it there. And by that, I mean, it's much easier to maintain a clean space than it is to go from cluttered to clean on like a more frequent basis. So when I say these words, it's possible that you feel overwhelmed by the idea and you're just kind of like, well, duh, but like, I can't actually do that because it's overwhelming. Yes, it is. Yes, it is so overwhelming. And I've been there so many times. And so I want to kind of walk you through some things that I do to take a cluttered space to more of a decluttered space. How original. But I think before you can actually begin the decluttering process, it's really important to extend yourself like a really healthy dose of grace, understanding, and space to be the way that you are. If you have ADHD, it's possible that you might need to do these things in a different way than you were taught, in a different way than you've observed other people doing them, and just giving yourself the mental and emotional space to do that, to do things in your way, and to not be upset with yourself when it's not perfect or it's not quick. That can take a lot of the shame, a lot of the burden, a lot of the mental and emotional overwhelm out of the equation and kind of light the way forward, if that makes sense. Then I recommend approaching your home room by room. And the reason that I recommend doing it this way is because, as I've talked about before, and I'm sure you've heard, little wins are sometimes all you need to be able to propel you through something that seems really daunting or overwhelming. It's easy for us to start something and have this kind of feeling of being condemned to fail or not to finish or to come up short. And so when you kind of set your sights on a smaller task, one at a time, it really helps to build that confidence, that momentum, and that dopamine activity so that you can actually sustain those efforts for a longer period of time. You could even employ the list making method with this approach as well if you want to list out the rooms in your house that need to be addressed, and then pick one that you're starting with and make a sub list of the major things that need to be done in that room. So I see kind of two really helpful paths, and you can even use them at the same time when approaching a room to declutter. The first one is, like I said, making a list. So if you want to see a list of like items that you can check off at the end of which you will be done with that room, that can be really helpful. And this process is kind of the fun part because it's easy, it's low stakes, it's easy, and even after the end of making the list, you feel a little bit of confidence and a little bit of momentum building up. So I would make a list, say if you're doing your bedroom, I would say, okay, I want to make sure that the closet gets cleaned out. I want to make sure that under the bed gets cleaned out. I want to make sure that the corner over there with the beanbag chair gets cleaned out, and then have this list and then approach those tasks in whatever order feels like inspiring to you. And by the time the task list is done, your room will be completed. The other thing that I like to do sometimes is actually, especially if it's a room that is exceptionally cluttered or exceptionally overwhelming, I like to make a list of categories. And actually, my dad taught me how to do this when I was a kid. When I would clean my room and my room would be super messy and super overwhelming because I was a kid who had ADHD. So typically what I do first is my first category is always clothing. And so what I'll do is I'll go around the room and I will pick up every item of clothing that is out of place. So if it's clean clothes that need to be put away, I do that. If it's dirty clothes that need to go to the laundry room, I do that. If it's dirty sheets that need to go to the laundry room and changed, I do that. So anything that's like clothing, laundry, linens, like all textile related things, I will do those first. And the thing that happens when you do it in categories is similar to what happens when you do it in sections, like closet, under the bed, corner, stuff like that, where you can visually see a difference and you can wrap your head around the entire task you've just done. So you can look around in your room and say, holy cow, there were a bunch of clothes here and sheets and towels, and they're just gone. Look at that work that I did. Look what I've accomplished. I really feel like I could do another thing. So then the next task I typically do is something like garbage, or yeah, I'll probably do garbage next, because that's also usually a really easy one. It's pretty easy to look around and say, well, that's garbage and that's garbage and that's garbage. And not only do you finish a task, but you can visually see yourself getting closer and closer to being done. And so this momentum snowball happens where you just feel more and more motivated. And this helps a lot when it comes to the harder categories because you've built up all of this momentum and confidence. Okay, and I have one last tip about decluttering, and that is to use any kind of mechanism or strategy that works for you to keep yourself engaged. So for example, if I am home alone, I might put on music and just like turn it up really loud. If I'm home and there are other people here, I might do like a little bit quieter, either a show or a podcast or a YouTube video. And that helps a lot because it helps to have some constant stimulation for my brain while I'm doing something that isn't terribly enjoyable. But also in the case of having like some kind of visual media playing, like a YouTube video or a movie, it can help to kind of feel almost like you have a body double, which is a huge help when it comes to cleaning and organizing. Okay, so that is it for today's video. I hope you guys found it helpful. And again, please let me know if you have any tips for cleaning, decluttering, getting organized, staying organized, any of the above. I appreciate you watching this video. I will link a couple videos that I've made on ADHD related topics in the description below for you to check out. And hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye.